It's time for that TBR game you've been waiting for, Shelve It or Shove It, the completely superficial way to pick books for your TBR based solely on their cover. I am your host, the booktube goddess, the #1 drag queen booktuber on YouTube. As usual, we'll be looking at the Goodreads new releases, this time for September 2022. To add to October's TBR, I'm just going to do one book, and we're going to be looking at young adult science fiction and fantasy, so let's get right into it. Starting in young adult, we have Kingdom of the Feared by Carrie Maniscalco. And I like this cover. I like the skull with the rubies in it. I like the crown with, it looks like it's broken. And I guess there are roses, look like metal roses around the skull. I think it's very well done, but it seems a little generic. So I'm going to have to shove it. Next up is The Ballad of Never After by Stephanie Garber. Now, if I thought the last book was generic, this is even more so. There is a floating sword in a sea of stars. I'm going to have to shove it. Next up is Foul Lady Fortune by Chloe Gong. I really like the illustration. It looks like a perfume bottle or chess piece made out of glass, and there's a skull on it and a Asian character, kanji maybe, or Chinese, I'm not sure, and maybe cherry blossoms around it. I really like that illustration, but why does the title blot it out? I wish that title was a little bit smaller. Foul Lady Fortune. I'm not even crazy about the font. I like the pink, peachy color scheme. I want to like this. It's just that font is covering up the illustration I want to see. I don't know. I kind of like it. I don't know. I'm taking too long. I'm just going to go ahead and shove it. Next up is The Sunbearer Trials by Aidan Thomas. Oof. There's a lot of skulls. This one has a skull too. So this is like our third skull we've seen in young adult. Anyway, I don't like this type of illustration. I mean, it shows a young man with wings. Maybe he's an angel or a bird man, and he's holding a crystal skull. It just looks very cartoony. It almost looks middle grade. Not speaking to me. I'm going to have to shove it. And finally, in young adult, we have The Weight of Blood by Tiffany D. Jackson. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? If you're thinking Carrie, that's what I'm thinking. It looks like Stephen King's Carrie. There's a prom queen, I mean, even says so, and there's blood dripping down her. I guess this is a horror novel, a young adult horror, which is interesting, although I haven't had luck with young adult horror in the past, but this is too derivative. I mean, come on. I'm gonna have to shove it. Next, we move on to science fiction, and the first book up, I know everyone is gonna know because it is Nona the Ninth, the sequel to the Gideon the Ninth series. I don't know what the series is called, but it's by Tamsin Muir. Now, I have read the first two books. I read Gideon the Ninth, which I loved. I adored Gideon the Ninth. The voice, oh my gosh, the voice in that writing was just so amazing. Hero the Ninth, the second book, was a different character that was the focus, and I was a little disappointed because I missed the voice in Gideon the Ninth so much, although I did appreciate sort of the chances the author took. It was very unique story crafting, I thought. And now we're coming to Nona the Ninth, which I believe is the final book in this series. I like the cover. I like the other two covers as well, but this one doesn't have that impact because the others had the obvious necromancer skeleton figure on the front. So, I don't know. It's a pretty cover. I know the author and I've read the first two books and I want to know what happens. So I'm going to shelve it. Next up is Leech by Huron Enns. And this is an interesting cover too. It looks like another perfume bottle, but I don't think that's what it is. I think it's a laboratory bottle because it's called Leech, so I'm thinking biochemical release. But it kind of looks like a fantasy novel because the image in the bottle looks like a fantasy castle or Russian castle with minarets. I'm not sure. So since it's in science fiction, I'm going to assume it's some type of biochemical release. Although who knows? Who knows? I like this cover. Oh, you know what? It's also, I'm picking for October. So maybe I will lean towards sort of a horror novel. And I have a feeling this is going to be a horror. I do like the cover. I think I'm going to shelve it. Next we have Genesis of Misery by Neon Yang. What a great first name, Neon. I wonder if that's his pen name or his, I don't know. Anyway, the cover, well, there's an alien in the back. It looks like a statue, but it reminds me of those aliens in Edgar Rice Burroughs' John Carter of Mars novels with the four-armed aliens, but they were green. This is white. It kind of looks like a statue though. And I guess there's a human woman floating before him. I'm guessing this is going to be space adventure because I see sort of a starscape behind them and there's an alien. The illustration is okay. It doesn't knock my socks off. It's a little bit cartoony. I think I'm going to have to shove it. Next up is Lark Ascending by Silas House. Can you get what this book is by the cover? I don't know. It's under science fiction. We know that. There's a waterfall and it looks almost like an oil slick, sort of that chromatic rainbow look. So maybe it's an ecological science fiction about pollution, but that is a huge guess. I like the artwork. It's just not telling me anything. So I'm going to have to shove it. Next up we have Exiles by Ashley Saunders and Leslie Saunders. It's kind of an interesting font that repeats itself, only the central word, Exiles, is in yellow while the others are in green, and it looks like there are 3 spray paint streams covering it. So I guess maybe it's dystopian. That's kind of the mood I'm getting, but don't know enough just by the cover, so I'm going to have to shove it. And now we move on to fantasy. And guess what's first? Stephen King's Fairy Tale. This is another book I've been really looking forward to because it's Stephen King going full fantasy rather than horror. And I like the cover. Looks like blue bricks, but it looks like an eyeball because there's a stairway going down that looks like the pupil or the cornea or something. Don't ask me about anatomy. Anyway, love the cover, love the author. I think I'm going to have to shelve it. Next up is Thistlefoot by Jenna Rose Nether Cot. Boy, they couldn't have picked a font harder to read for the author's name. But I do appreciate this cover. I like how it looks like a hand-drawn illustration of Baba Yaga's hut. If you don't know, Baba Yaga is a Russian folklore, and she's a witch that rides a house with chicken legs. There's that middle grade book called House with Chicken Legs. If you're into D&D, you may have seen Baba Yaga's hut as one of the legendary artifacts. I like the black and white illustration. I like that it's telling us it's contemporary because we see, it looks like a bridge with a car going down it. So this isn't a Russian folktale set in ancient Russia. There's two figures. There's like curtains at the top. So I wonder if there's something to do with the stage or theater. I don't know. You know what? I like it enough. I think I'm going to go ahead and shelve. Next up, we have The Witch and the Tsar by Olesya Salnikova-Gilmore. Sure, I'm butchering that name. Anyway, the cover is pretty. I like sort of those orange trees that form a face, which I assume is a witch, but there's an opening in the trees that looks like there's some minarets, some type of Russian castle, which I guess is where the Tsar is staying. There's something a little bit muted about the colors, so it's not saturated, so it's not popping out at me, and I'm not sure I'm in love with this font. It's not really drawing me in enough. I think I'm going to go ahead and shove it. Next up we have Spells for Forgetting by Adrian Young. And as soon as we move on, I'm going to be forgetting this cover because it is so forgettable. What is this? It looks like a misty forest, and there's these stars, which I guess are like from a headlight or not. I don't know. I don't like this cover at all. I'm going to have to shove it. And finally, we have The Golden Enclaves by Naomi Novik. And you know, I am a huge fan of Naomi Novik. I've read the first two in the Scholomance series, and I've liked the other covers, but I like this too. It's very simple, but it looks like a doorway with these eyeballs. It's all illustrated, but the eyes almost look like UFOs flying around this window. I love this series. I love this author. You know, I'm going to have to shelve it. So we have shelved 5 books. 5. Nona the Ninth by Tamsin Muir, Leech by Huron Ends, Stephen King's Fairy Tale, Thistlefoot by Jenna Rose Nethercott, and The Golden Enclaves by Naomi Novik. You know, I'm eventually going to read Nona the Ninth and The Golden Enclaves because I've been reading this series. I've read the first 2 books. I plan to read these. So let's just take them off for now, knowing that I will be reading this at some point. That leaves Leech, Fairy Tale, and Thistlefoot. You know, just going by the covers, the Stephen King cover is really popping. That sort of cobalt, dark, deep blue is really just popping out. Plus, it's October. So Stephen King in October seems traditional. Although the others 2 could be horror novels too. I'm just going to stick with the cover that's pulling me in. Fairy Tale by Stephen King. Let's go ahead and read the blurb. Legendary storyteller Stephen King goes deep into the well of his imagination in this spell-binding novel about a 17-year-old boy who inherits the keys to a parallel world where good and evil are at war, and the stakes could not be higher. for their world are ours. Charlie Reed looks like a regular high school kid, great at baseball and football, a decent student, but he carries a heavy load. His mom was killed in a hit-and-run accident when he was 10, and grief drove his dad to drink. Charlie learned how to take care of himself and his dad. Then, when Charlie is 17, he meets Howard Bowditch, a recluse with a big dog in a big house at the top of a big hill. In the backyard is a locked shed from which strange sounds emerge, as if some creature is trying to escape. When Mr. Bowditch dies, he leaves Charlie the house, a massive amount of gold, a cassette tape telling a story that is impossible to believe, and a responsibility far too massive for a boy to shoulder. Because within the shed is a portal to another world, one whose denizens are in peril and whose monstrous leaders may destroy their own world and ours. In this parallel universe where 2 moons race across the sky and the grand towers of a sprawling palace pierce the clouds, there are exiled princesses and princes who suffer horrific punishments. There are dungeons, there are games in which men and women must fight each other to the death for the amusement of the fair one. And there is a magic sundial that can turn back time, a story as old as myth and as startling and iconic as the rest of King's work. Fairy Tale is about an ordinary guy forced into the hero's role by circumstance, and it is both spectacularly suspenseful and satisfying. Okay, I think I was right. A contemporary portal fantasy. I'm surprised they didn't market this as young adult since the main character is 17, but this is Stephen King, so maybe it's a bit too dark for a young adult. Or maybe his audience is mostly adults, so they know who to market it to. But whatever the case is, I'm excited and intrigued and curious about Fairy Tale by Stephen King. What books would you have selected just based on their cover? Let me know down in the comments, and while you're there, like this video and subscribe to my channel. Until we meet again, may all the books you read be blessed.